Hello booktube, hello book friends. Welcome back to my channel and a pile of possibilities video for Dr. November, the reading event in November where we read books about spies, espionage, counterintelligence, etc. And this is going to be a video in two parts. So I'm going to focus purely on fiction in this video. I'll do a separate video for non-fiction, but this one will be purely about spy fiction, and I'm going to split it into some general sort of suggestions, recommendations, take them or leave them, thoughts on some fairly popular spy authors, and then second part will be kind of my specific plans, because I've kind of whittled things down a bit more for me. Some of this is based on questions I had on my announcement video, so some suggestions to kind of help people out. But I think a lot of the authors I'm going to talk about you will have heard of, you may not necessarily have read many of their books, you might be interested to read their books but don't know where to start. So my aim is to kind of give you some suggestions anyway. So let's start with perhaps one of the most famous spy authors, and that's John le Carré. John le Carré, who died relatively recently in the last few years, probably best known for writing books about the character George Smiley, but he wrote many more books than that. But I'm going to suggest, if you want to get into this John le Carré spy fiction, that maybe Smiley is the place to start. Now, if you really want to start at the beginning of Smiley's stories, you really want to start with Call for the Dead. Now, I will say, although Smiley features heavily in this book and he is technically a spy, Call for the Dead is more crime fiction than spy fiction. So it's a good place to start, but if you're expecting, battling the Russians or something like that, you're not going to get that. But it is a good place to start, and it is a good book. I really recommend it. I would thoroughly recommend it. If you want to start somewhere else with John le Carré, and I know a lot of people have said they're thinking of reading this, and that's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Smiley doesn't feature very much as a specific character in Spy Who Came In From the Cold, but he is interwoven throughout the story, and that becomes apparent, particularly if you know a little bit more about the character. But yeah, that's a good choice as well. It's a good read. And then what is known as the Carla trilogy, which is 3 books and perhaps another one of le Carré's most famous books, which is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, made into numerous films, TV adaptations. But this, The Honourable Schoolboy and Smiley's People, are the Carla trilogy, and this is probably the centre piece of George Smiley, written by John le Carré. So some different places you can kind of enter that space. There are, of course, other stories. Some of his more recent works, Agent Running in the Field, for example, also worth considering. But I would suggest, in terms of John le Carré, those are probably some of the best places to start. So that's John le Carré. I have lots of books today, so I've kind of got piles everywhere and side table to work from. One of the things that I was asked about was, I haven't got a lot of time to read big books, but are there any books of short stories. There are lots of kind of, short story collections by, edited by different authors out there. I couldn't necessarily recommend one over another. But if you want some short stories by a well-known spy author and a character you'll probably be very familiar with, you could try reading some of Ian Fleming's James Bond short stories. There are effectively two collections of short stories. The first is For Your Eyes Only, and the second is for one that I have featured on the channel recently for the reading event October, and that is Octopussy and the Living Daylights. So again, a couple of short story recommendations from a famous author. Where else could you start? Well, you could try the eponymously titled Dr. No, which, you know what I mean. Or you could start at the beginning with some of the early. So Casino Royale is the first in the series, and then Live and Let Die is a second. So you could start at the beginning. You could also start with what is known as the Spectre trilogy. So Spectre, if you've ever watched any of the films, you'll know is one of the adversarial special executive for counter-terrorism, revenge and extortion. There you go. And the Spectre trilogy is 3 books: Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and You Only Live Twice. So again, somewhere else to start. If you're really interested in getting into the depths of James Bond and Ian Fleming, a couple of my favourites, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, and The Spy Who Loved Me, which is very different from the Roger Moore film. Very, very different, and very different from a lot of the other Bond novels as well. But I would recommend that. So that's Ian Fleming. There are also a number of what are regarded as Bond continuation authors. So there is John Gardner, who wrote quite a few novels on the character of James Bond. There's also Raymond Benson, who wrote a number of Bond novels, and a couple that you will be probably a little bit more familiar with. The sorry, it's lost the cover. Having set all this up very carefully last night, Geoffrey Deaver, who's better known for writing the Lincoln Rhyme crime novels, and William Boyd, who also wrote a Bond continuation novel. Also, Anthony Horowitz has written several, and there is a more recent continuation novelist who I'm not going to mention because I don't like those books. So those are the other kind of, if you're interested in James Bond but don't want to read any Ian Fleming, you could try one of the kind of continuation authors. And there is one further one, which is Kingsley Amis. So he is also a Bond continuation author. Right, where do we go from here? Let's go to, you will have heard of the character Jason Bourne. written by Robert Ludlum. So made into films with Matt Damon. So there is The Bourne Identity. Again, these are different to the movie adaptation. So well worth, if you've seen the film and want to know what the source material was, it's very worthwhile reading, because you will probably get quite a bit out of all three. And they follow the same sequence as the movies. So the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne Ultimatum, and they go on. And there are then also, as with the Bond novels, authors who have taken up the mantle and written further stories with that character. And again, well worth the read. Another one who I will recommend, familiar probably again through movies rather than books, and that's probably Michael Caine as Harry Palmer in the Ipcress Files, written by Len Deighton. But I'm going to suggest you start somewhere else with Len Deighton. There are 3 trilogies that Len Deighton wrote, all with the same set of characters, and centered around Bernie Sampson, or Bernard Sampson. The first is Berlin Game. These are very much Cold War thrillers, where the Berlin Wall is still in place. There is an East and West Germany. Russia is kind of on a bit of an ascendancy. I would recommend these. I would also recommend that you at least read Berlin Game first. But I would recommend you read them all in order, because there is a thread that runs throughout the series. So the first trilogy is Berlin Game, Mexico Set, and London Match. So Game, Set, Match. I remember these when they were in the bookshops originally, and I'm just going to look and see when this was. So this was 1986, originally published in 1985. Very, very popular at the time. Not surprisingly, a few years later, he went on to write the second set of trilogy, which is Spy Hook, Spyline, and Spy Sinker. And those are fantastic covers, I think. They've all got fantastic covers. So that was like 1989 to 1990. So they came out relatively quickly. And then finally, and I'm not sure whether it was ever Deighton's intention to write 3 sets of trilogies, but he, in the mid-90s, wrote Faith, Hope, and Charity. And as I say, all of these are based around the character of Bernard Sampson and what happens to him through the course, of effectively the height of the Cold War to the kind of Berlin Wall coming down, or about to be coming down. And yeah, I would thoroughly recommend those. I'd also recommend some other Len Deighton's, and a lot of the Harry Palmer books are not about a character called Harry Palmer. He doesn't have a particular name, but there are books. So there's Horse Underwater, City of Gold, An Expensive Place to Die, which is about a clinic where people are treated and relieved of their secrets. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Spy, Mamista, and one that goes back to the beginning of the Second World War, XPD, standing for Expedient Demise. So lots to choose from with Len Deighton, and are all really good. Another spy author who's perhaps not very well known now, but was very popular when she was originally writing, and that is Helen MacInnes. So she wrote a number of really good spy thrillers. So this is While Still We Live, which is about a lady who gets effectively trapped. I think it's in Poland at the start of the Second World War, ends up working for the resistance, and everything that entails. There's also Decision at Delphi, and she wrote, I don't know how many she wrote, I don't know whether it says in here. There's also Above Suspicion, which is really good, The Venetian Affair, The Salzburg Connection, all really good spy fiction, and I would recommend any of them, to be honest. Then I get to mention two of my all-time favourite authors, and a third who I think is going to be popular this Dr. November. So who are they? Well, with no surprise that one of them is Alistair MacLean, and I've picked a couple that are probably the most spy related. So The Last Frontier, and this is effectively about a agent having to go into, I want to say Czechoslovakia, but I might be wrong. Say on the back, no, it doesn't. To effectively extract a scientist who has knowledge of sort of chemical weapons or chemicals that could be used as weapons. And then The Dark Crusader, which was originally written under his pen name of Ian Stewart. And this is about a number of scientists who are going missing, all with particular knowledge about particular aspects of rocket technology and ballistic missile weapons. And so this is about a scientist who is asked to go undercover as the next person to be kind of, or the next person to go missing. So that's really good. And then probably finally, an author who I also talk about all the time on the channel, and that's Craig Thomas. And you could start anywhere with the Aubrey and Hyde series, but the first is very good, which is Sea Leopard, and this concerns a British submarine with new technology on it that the Russians are trying to steal, both technology and the submarine. And also two of my favourites, The Last Raven and The Bear's Tears. So I would recommend any book by Craig Thomas, but those would be my particular picks. And then finally, and this is kind of to give me a bit of a segue into what I'm planning to read. So, book that has been mentioned by a few people as potential Dr. November reading is Ken Follett's Eye of the Needle, the story of the German spy Henry Faber, who has discovered secrets about Operation Overlord and D-Day, which would effectively render the campaign null and void if those secrets got back to his masters in the Third Reich. So this is trying to basically find out who Henry Faber really is, and where he is, and stop him returning to Germany with his knowledge and secrets. So brilliant novel. I read that relatively recently, so I'm thinking of another Ken Follett novel also set in the Second World War, and that is The Key to Rebecca, which is again around codes, and the use of Daphne du Maurier's book Rebecca as a one-time source for code breaking. So looking forward to reading that. So what else am I thinking of reading? I have a namesake who writes spy fiction, or wrote spy fiction. I think he's not writing any longer. And I was kind of vaguely aware of him as a kind of teenager, but never read any of his books. And then, of course, because that was, 30, 40 years ago, his books became much harder to find. But they are now all being re-released by a publisher, mostly as ebooks. But I am planning to read the first of those, which is Barbu's. So a Cold War thriller. Much more about it I do not know, because I've not read it. But yes, he's described as the natural successor to Ian Fleming. Whether that is true or not, I'll let you know. I'm also, and I keep talking about this, and this is actually a book I want to read this month so that I, in November, can read the sequel, which is coming out. So this is Frederick Forsyth, The Odessa File. Frederick Forsyth, as you may know, passed away earlier this year. And there is I think it's called Revenge of Odessa, which is the sequel to this book, and that is coming out. I think it's either end of October or early November, so just in time for Dr. November. But I want to reread the Odessa File because I can't remember it very well, and I want to reread it before the new book comes out. I also want to read, I don't know whether I'm going to get to all of these, but we'll see. Eric Ambler's The Mask of Demetrius, which I think was a popular choice last year for Dr. November, and I never got to it. So this is about a crime novelist who is travelling in Istanbul and is kind of drawn into basically some shady dealings, and as the saying goes, the story develops from there. So that's a choice. I've mentioned that for my non-fiction picks, I mostly want to focus on the period 1930 to 1950 for non-fiction. So that covers sort of the Second World War, SOE, and so on. So for my fiction picks, I also want to kind of throw in maybe a couple of related fiction. So I've got Sebastian Faulks' Charlotte Gray, which is about a female SOE agent who is working in France during the Second World War. And then I've got Night Sky by Claire Francis, which similarly is about the work of the French resistance and SOE in the Second World War. I'm running out of space. And then finally, and I don't know whether I'll get to them or not, but I mentioned William Boyd earlier in connection with Bond continuation novels. He has a new spy series, and this is what's the name? Gabriel Dax is the character, and this I think is going to be a trilogy. So this is the first, which is Gabriel's Moon. So it's something for me to get my teeth into. I think the second one has just been published, but I don't know much about that. And then Charles Beaumont, A Spy Alone, again, the first in a new series about the kind of Oxford. This was the Cambridge spy ring, and this is kind of poses the question: was there also an Oxford spy ring? So yeah, looking forward to reading that as well. So that, I think, is it, at least for now. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask down below in the comments. If you've got any, let me know what you're thinking of reading. You know, what are that, any of those on your list, or have you got different books? Let me know down below. I will link to all the co-hosts. I'm sure they will also be doing Pile of Possibility videos over the next few weeks. I will come back and do another non-fiction one in a while. Depends on how long it takes me to find all the books and film it. But it will be before the beginning of November. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you for watching if you have been, and I will speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.